welcome to Adventures with Scars. I am your host, Lauren Huffmaster. Adventures with Scars is a discussion on the invisible side effects of cancer, the emotional side effects. Last season, I presented my philosophy on the aspects of the cancer experience that are difficult to put into words. I tried to define what is invisible and presented a timeline of how we heal from the trauma of cancer. In this second season, I'm talking with patients, survivors, co-survivors, and all of those impacted with cancer. These discussions help us all to better understand the experience we walk through. Today, I'm speaking with Krista Kusuma. She is a dear friend, and she's been living with cancer. Krista, thank you so much for sharing your story today.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm delighted to be here in your company.
Well, tell us a little bit about your life as you've lived with cancer.
Well, it all started in hospital when I was giving birth to my second child in 2016, very end of 2016. I was having trouble breastfeeding, and I just assumed, as we do, late stage pregnancy, early postpartum, that these were just bizarre body changes. And the stony faces of the nurses and the doctors that were coming into the room were giving me pause, but I still had no idea what was to come. And so couple days after the baby was born, while we were in hospital, I was sent downstairs to have a core biopsy. And that's, I think, when the light bulb started to go on. And the day that we got back to our house with our newborn was the day that we received the the dreaded call that nobody wants to get, that said, you have cancer. And I was 37. No, I think forget how old I am. I think I was 39, 37 with the first child. And I'm healthy, I'm vibrant, I'm ready for this. And I was very, very lucky to have amazing doctors and healthcare providers. And they said, because you're healthy and strong, we're going to hit you with a very aggressive regimen. It was stage 3 at that time, right breast, and had gone into some of my nodes were affected. And so I went through a rigorous treatment of chemo and surgery and radiation, and then resumed life and decided, we were just going to, with our toddler and our newborn, continue. And life did continue and go back to the normal. And then we noticed the tumor markers rising again. And that was 2021. So in the midst of our global pandemic also. And then we received another diagnosis and some more scans that now it's metastatic. And again, I did chemo and radiation, no surgery this time. Beat it back, but it is now a part of the fabric of our life, not just the shadow that looms, but also something that I walk in lockstep with and have had to incorporate into my life and my mindset and my family in a very different way than we did the first chapter.
I think two things are really important that I just want to point out. One is this idea that finding that you have cancer, either in pregnancy or breastfeeding. I think this is a very common story for young women who are diagnosed with breast cancer, because our estrogen surges when we're having babies, our estrogen surges when we're nursing, and that is giving the cancer a chance to grow. And so this is a very common story. We're hearing more and more. The second thing I think is really interesting, and I love to hear this, is that your tumor markers were what sort of gave you insight to something might be happening.
Yes.
I really, really lean on my tumor markers for lots of things, for peace of mind when they're stable and or they're shrinking, and for, alert, just to pay attention when they're growing. I think in the past, at least, tumor markers weren't used very consistently, and people are unsure about them. But I think that for me, at least, they've been a very useful tool. And I'm glad that they were an indicator, a piece of data you could use as well to manage your cancer.
Yes, and early indicators, which also I just feel so lucky that it was caught early again, and that we're managing it. I say we because I think of the whole system, the whole ecosystem around me as helping me to live well.
Yeah, I think I might be wrong, but my understanding is tumor markers, you can see the change in your blood almost 6 months before you see it in a scan. And that's been true for my life as well. When I see my tumor markers go up, my scans can be the same for the next couple rounds, but then eventually I see that change on the scan as well. So you're right. They're very early indicators. They give us a chance to take a quick step before, sort of get before the cancer and it's growing. So yes, and I love this idea of the whole ecosystem of support. It's easy to get jaded, maybe, I don't know, thinking that we as patients are doing all the work, because it is so much work sometimes to walk through cancer, to do the treatments and the walk through the scans. Are the only ones that have to lay on that table, but so many researchers and family members and so many people are around us creating these opportunities, these medications, these systems, so that we do have the support we need where we need. So I always love your perspective. You're very gracious, and you're always acknowledging everyone else. I appreciate that. So in this process, what was a moment? Do you have a moment that was particularly difficult, that you had to face, or something that caught you by surprise?
Oh, one moment. Well, I was sharing this story with you a moment ago, and I'll share it again, which is that that I think it's easy when you're going through treatment, or it certainly was in my case, to think a lot about myself and my experience, and I'm just, going to battle this and then get to the other side. And then on the other side, then I can bury this behind me and just think about what's ahead. And in the moment, it's hard to take a step back and look at the people that are around you, especially the people in my house, and think, oh, what is it like to be my spouse with a brand newborn and a brand new newborn and a toddler in the house, and now a wife who's battling a life-threatening illness, and what was that like? So that I can't think of one particular moment that made me think about that, but I do remember when I was putting a winter hat on about a year or year and a half after my first diagnosis, and my hair had started to grow back, but it was still pretty short, and it was cold outside, and I thought, well, I still have this wealth of hats to wear, and so why don't I pull out one of my favorite soft caps that I used to wear all the time when I had no hair. And my putting that on my head was, I saw the look on my older child's face, and I had assumed he was too young or too oblivious to really notice. But he had this stricken look, and I realized that he had his own experience of trauma going through that as well. And while he's pretty young and can't articulate, I think, all of those feelings, that was my realization that it's in there, that it affects them too. I still can't hear you, Lauren.
Something different.
Perfect.
Okay. It's so hard to understand what's happening in the lives of our children. I had one mom tell me that whenever her household ran out of milk, it meant her kids totally freaked out, because the only time she didn't go to the store regularly was when she was sick. And so this idea that there was this lacking in the fridge triggered, even if she was healthy and she had just had a busy week, triggered this idea that something was going to happen wrong with her again. And yeah, the kids have their own rhythms, right? Their own expectations they have from us that we aren't even aware of. Maybe, we know what we think that they need, but they have a whole different perspective of us. And seeing them respond and react, perhaps become more emotional. I was talking about some of my kids sometimes are more emotional or more protective. It's interesting to see glimpses of how our cancer story impacts our kids. And it's really not probably something we'll fully understand for decades, maybe forever. But they are always adjusting, and I think that's the real crux of it. Is they're always adjusting to us, whether we're healthy or we're on the couch resting. They're constantly watching us. That's how they learn and grow. They're always adjusting to us, and when we are adjusting to ourselves, figuring out our own strengths and our own story with cancer, they are having to do twice as much adjusting. And I think it's probably relatively exhausting emotionally for them and mentally for them, probably, as they figure out life while we're also figuring out life.
Yeah, and at the same time, I think their resilience, that adaptive quality that allows them to incorporate and move on, is also really inspiring. And as a mother, as somebody who loves her children as you do, it's just I just love watching my children thrive. I get so much satisfaction out of seeing their bodies grow and be healthy, and they're thriving.
I believe that our kids are going to be the most resilient of the next generation. Like any child who's had to grow up with such empathy. And I was saying that my oldest daughter is a little bit like my bouncer these days. If anyone asks anything of me, she's like, no, my mom needs to rest. She needs to take care of herself. She doesn't have time for your stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's just such empathy and compassion. And she is learning to gauge what I need rather than me gauging what she needs. And I think they're all of my kids, all of the kids in homes with families impacted by cancer, they're going to be so resilient. They're going to be so compassionate. They're going to look at the world and not really focus on their own needs, perhaps, but really what makes this place better? What does the world need? What do people need? What do my neighbors need? They're going to see the world through these nothing can take us down eyes, right? Like our family faced all sorts of stuff. There's nothing you can throw at us that we can't handle. So that's going to be an amazing perspective. But then this coming alongside one another, this idea that life is about holding each other up. And we take turns at that. It's not one person has to be strong all the time, but we all work together, take turns being strong so that we can continue forward. And I just think that this next generation is the generation being raised by those of us impacted by disease or terminal disease or chronic disease, they have such opportunity to lead the way, to create a society of just deeply meaningful future, a deeply meaningful future. And I'm so excited for who they'll become.
Yeah, agreed. It goes back to that idea of the ecosystem too. These are children who are keenly aware, as we are, of the people around us, of the network of support, and also of the gifts that you can leverage with each other. So if your child doesn't have X, Y, or Z, they know that they can partner with somebody else. And I think those instincts will certainly, or muscles will continue to serve them as they become adults.
Absolutely. I just noticed in my kids this last few months when I went back into chemo, people bring us meals and sending us gifts. And just, I think when they were younger, obviously they didn't have any sort of recognition of what was happening, but now they are so thankful, this sense of gratitude, this ecosystem of relationships, right? This network, and how impactful a gift card or a meal can be on our family, right? These little acts of kindness have this deep meaning, because it's the difference between them eating peanut butter and jelly and having a slight party because someone brought them cookies, right? And just these little shifts in life, these small kindnesses can mean so much. And I think they truly are growing in gratitude. And I think also our families served other families for so many years. I think they're beginning to understand what those acts of service meant to other people as well. And so, yeah, it's just such an amazing variety of growth available to our kids during this cancer season. But I want to know I want to tell the rest of your story. So since your metastatic diagnosis, right? So life does not end with your metastatic diagnosis. We continue to live. We can keep cancering on, right? And so tell me tell us what you've been up to since then.
Yeah, I operate on, I think, a mantra of thriving and not just surviving. I'm always interested, I think, in not only how can I make it better, but how can we live well and do well by other people. And so about 2 years ago now, kind of in the midst of all of this, I opened my own business and am doing coaching and consulting. Largely, I've been serving museum clients, but I've been working with people in public-facing roles to grow and stretch and thrive in their organizations, and to lead change as well.
That's amazing. So how does that feel? How does it feel to step out and become something different in the midst of all this?
I think that that cancer is for me, I think of this as a gift. I say to other people that it is it's a dark gift that you wouldn't wish on anyone else, but it gives you this this perspective and this will that is like a fire in your belly. And so it feels really great to hold space for other people, and for and to show up and give them this kind of generous glow of attention, which I think even with our spouses, we sometimes don't sit down and sit eye to eye for more than a few seconds at a time, but really to give somebody your whole, undivided, embodied attention is such a gift for both the recipient, the person on the other end, and also for me. It's a transformative exercise in gift giving.
Well, and do you think that, okay, so what were you doing for your job before cancer?
Mm. My job before cancer was also mixed in with having a family, right? I was working full time at a museum as an assistant director of guest experience, assistant director of education with a specialty in guest experience, and with a newborn and a cancer diagnosis, we knew that wasn't going to be sustainable. So I took a leave of absence and worked a little bit part-time for museums, and then we moved across the country. So it was a real time to rethink, adapt, and then of course with the second cancer re-diagnosis or another time to really think about how do I squeeze meaning out of this time that I have and live every day with intentionality and purpose and make a difference. And I'm not interested, I think, in a legacy and a foundation or needing to have my name on a book or a monument of some kind. The legacy that I want to have is like this ripple effect that will bear fruits, both in the love that I give to my children and in the love and attention and coaching that I offer to other people, whether it's in a formal client relationship or a friend relationship. It's that I will be in there, named or not named.
That's awesome. I love this idea of legacy. I think that legacy really holds the key for any of us with metastatic disease, especially because you really have two choices. You decide that what I've done up until this point is enough, and from now on, I'm just going to manage cancer, and that's sort of my future. And that's as far as we can see. And sometimes that's all we have the capacity to see. There are moments for sure where just processing this shifting identity is all that we have. And at the moment, all you can see is cancer. Cancer is the only identity I can hold on to. But then there are moments where we can start to see this idea of legacy, this idea of ripples, this idea of what goes out from me, right? Wherever I am, wherever I, drop into that giant lake or the pond or the ocean, what goes out from me?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is important. This comes down to, if we can answer that question, if we can figure out what do I want to go out from me, then we can become that, because we are more than what we do, right? We're more than carpools and coaching softball or our jobs, or, even bring milk home from the grocery store. We're more than that. There's so much more going on in our lives and who we are than what we do. And even if we're on the couch and we need to rest for 12 to 24 to 48 hours at a time, there is something going out from us, right? There are ripples we're releasing to our families, to our friends. And these ripples can be accessed even in our darkest times.
Mm-hmm.
This is our legacy, right? This is what we are remembered for. This is what people know us by, even if they don't know us well. They have this sense of who we are when we're not doing anything, and I think that in our society is so busy and focused on activity, we sometimes forget the deepest value we hold has nothing to do with what we do, but it has who we are, what we are. And these are things that cannot be shaken and they cannot be stripped from us.
Mm-hmm.
And so these ripples, I think this idea of legacy, it might drive us to do something. It drove me to start adventure therapy and to really have these conversations about cancer. It drove you, who you are, your legacy, your sense of who you want people to know you as, drove you to start this coaching, and your deeper values led you to action. But there are times when we can't lead to action, but we can still be that person, right? We can still hold and exude and live out the person that we are. And I think this is really important for people, especially with metastatic disease or really any diagnosis, to consider, to deeply consider this idea of legacy. What ripples do you want to release into your family and into the world and into your friends? I love this. I love this idea.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was thinking of a story that's actually from quite some time ago, but my earliest career was as a high school teacher. And I remember this gift that the students gave me one year that is the feeling I think that I want to hold on to right now. And so I had been teaching art history in the model of a teacher I really admire. And at the end of the year, my students had gone both to the Getty Museum to get a piece of travertine, which is like marble that the Getty was made from. And then they went to a painting store to buy a painting, and it was this group of students that got together and coordinated this effort. And it was both kind of their graduation gift to me because they were graduating from school, and it was also a thank you for the course, for the teaching, and that feeling, I think, of I'm in there, the material that I had to share with them is just the currency between us, but there's so much more that was happening in that time that that they were honoring by giving me that gift. And I know without following them that they are holding pieces of that time even now. And I think that's the kind of ripple, the kind of, community or legacy that I hope to carry for other people.
Definitely. And I think that we do, right? And there's also the idea of like seeds, right? A flower blooms, and then in different seasons it sheds its seeds and they fly off to who knows where, and then in a new season it blooms again and it sheds those seeds again. And those seeds, they're scattered and they might be dormant for years at a time, but eventually they also bloom and then they scatter. And it's just this idea of multiplication, right? That we're so much, our impact, our legacy is so much more than, again, what we do that day to day. There is a multiplication happening as we invest in others and they invest in others, and these ripples continue to build into each other and become bigger, like the multiplication of seeds. And beauty pops up in places we've never been, right? In places that your students have been to places that you've never been. Your kids will go to places that you may never go. And yet your gift to them, the seeds you've planted in them, these ripples you've set loose in their life will go on and will continue on. And I think that when we think about pain, and Viktor Frankl says, A Man's Search for Meaning, he says, the only thing that makes pain worthwhile is finding purpose in that story, right? And I think these are the deeper purposes in our story. We have to find that deeper form and function of our life, right? We think it's this one thing, like to pick up and drop off and make meals and, do the motherly duties, but really there's this so much deeper going on that's about safety and relationship and companionship and encouragement and support. And those are the things that kids actually remember. They're probably not going to remember that I drive 112 miles a day to take them places, right? But they will remember that they were safe and they were supported and I was at their side and I listened to their stories. And those deeper values are what will release them and their future to live out such things, because they've been so well supported in those spaces. And this is legacy, right? This is what will go beyond us, what will multiply beyond us, into the lives of so many others.
Yeah, I love that image of a seed. It makes me think too of the mustard seed that is so small, and yet when planted can, like a wildfire, take off. And I think of that sometimes when I'm packing the millionth school lunch and I'm thinking, are they going to eat this today? Are those carrots going on a field trip to school and coming back home again? And then just taking a pause and saying, this is the work. These are the seeds. And then when you get the boys back, for me, I have 2 boys. When the boys come home at the end of the day and you see that they're taller, that they're smarter, that they're a little bit extra, a little bit more than you sent them away with that morning, you think, this is the work. These are the seeds.
Definitely. I love that. It's hard to witness the little things sometimes, the little changes, but it sounds like you take your good observation of your children and enjoy the process. So that's such a beautiful picture. Now, just one more time, I want to talk about, I think a lot of people would consider, when you have metastatic disease, that's not the time to go out. I think the Dalai Lama, at least he's quoted to say, like, if it was the last day on earth, I'd go out and plant a tree or something like that. Like, when you are diagnosed with metastatic disease, it's not the time to start a new foundation and try to do a bunch of things. It's not a time to start a new career or go out and start a new vision for life. But that's what you did, right? You went out and you took what it sounds to me like you took the best parts of what you loved before and you combined it with maybe the best parts of what you still wanted to live out, and you put them together and you created something new. So what made you want to do that? What made you move forward in that way?
Well, I don't know if it was one light bulb or a series of light bulbs. In fact, I think it was the fruit of a conversation that I had been having with a coach I was seeing, and just the fruits of that conversation. And we talked a lot about bridges in those conversations. And I remember thinking, so I'm a picture person, thinking of this bridge stretching out in front of me, and that I'm standing on the edge of this kind of rocky precipice that looks like I'm going to fall off the edge, and it's scary, and I can sit into those scary feelings, and sometimes I do, and feel those, the anxiety and the fear that comes with having a cancer diagnosis. But I also couldn't see that picture ever without also seeing a bridge. And the bridge wasn't, in my mind, super sturdy. It was kind of one of those like bridges that goes over a mountain chasm that you're not really sure you should be traversing. But it some enterprising mountaineers and engineers work together to make it happen. And enough people have gone back and forth both directions that you can trust those steps. And I think if anything, cancer has really made me want to live boldly and audaciously and really take advantage of, to go back, to take advantage of the time that I have. And so it only made sense that I would go across the bridge. And then I wanted to hold on to all of the things that I had been doing in my previous career, but kind of reimagine them in a way where I could spin the most impact and do the kind of work every day that I wanted to be doing, that I wanted to wake up and do. Whether that was, developing a workshop to solve an organization's problem, or a favorite was doing inclusive hospitality, because that just really speaks to me. How do you create a radical and warm welcome for members of the public to walk into your organization? How do you, as volunteers, steward volunteers and appreciate them for their time while also asking them to be a part of the welcome team? It's a big ask. But these are the projects that I think really feed me, really give me just deep satisfaction and make me feel like I have lots to give. And whether, I think sometimes, do I have a year? Do I have 10 years? My husband keeps saying, you're going to live forever. And I think, well, I don't know about that, but but no matter the time that I have, I feel like this is the time that I have. And what I want to be doing with it is helping other people really step into their potential and shed their doubts and their fears and their anxieties, and embrace the now, because this is the gift we have, is the present.
Absolutely. I had an idea and now I've lost it. I love that. Yeah, I love that you've taken what was and what had not yet been, and you sort of married them and you created a new path forward. Oh, I know what it was. This idea of the bridge. And you mentioned before we were on recording that the way forward came with bumps and bruises and scrapes and was not a clear path. It wasn't a very sturdy bridge, right? It wasn't a rock arch way that had been there 1,000 years and all you had to do is step into it. It was a little bit shaky, it's a little bit uncertain, but it's there, it's present, and it's an opportunity that you can step into. And yes, you might scrape your knee and fall or something along the way, but you can continue forward. And that's really what's important, is the idea that we can continue forward. I know that my way forward was absolutely a chaotic mess that I've scraped and fallen and cried multiple times. But I kept going forward, and it sounds like your experience forward is similar, that you have to be determined to cross that bridge. You have to be determined to continue, because it's not easy, it's not sure, but if you want to go forward, it's available. And I think that that's maybe the breakdown for some people, and that there's so much uncertainty already in cancer. There's so much uncertainty about what's going to happen in your body. You mentioned whether you have a year or 10 years or forever to live. These questions are already plaguing you, that it's hard to add additional uncertainty to life and say, if I take a step forward, I would go forward, but I will also scrape my knee. Like, do I want to invite additional uncertainty into my life? But in my situation, I would say absolutely you do, because it's different. It fills me up. It makes me excited. It makes me feel strong again. And yes, strong with bloodied knees and, and absolutely no clue about what I'm going to do next, but I'm doing something, and I'm releasing more of myself into the world. And I, maybe like you, don't want to find myself at the end of my time still full of all of me. I want to have given it all away. Everything I have to give away, I just want it out there. I want it in conversations. I want it in writing. I want it somewhere else. So that when I do come to the end of my days, I lay there and I have nothing left to give. I'm like, oh, well, I'm depleted. I've done it all, right? I've given it to someone somewhere, and now it's up to them to let it multiply into their own version of my seeds. But the idea that step out on that bridge, like, yes, you're probably going to fall. It's not going to feel safe all the time, but you're moving, you're living, right? And that's what's beautiful about it.
Yeah. Well, I'll say, who among us doesn't have that experience of the imposter, of feeling like, if I take this risk, then am I worthy, and I think, the imposter syndrome has nothing on the experience of cancer. And so there are certainly moments in my life where I've felt stuck and rooted and rigid in place. And then I think, putting on the lens of cancer, I think, well, I can live in that dark and scary and maybe safe place. And that perspective has kept me safe at different times, of leaning out instead of leaning in. But all of the times of my life that I have prized the most, that mean the most to me, that have given me such deep satisfaction, have been the times where I stuck my neck out, where I took uncomfortable risks, where I crossed that rickety bridge. And I won't say didn't come with those, saboteurs on your shoulder, occasionally giving you bad advice and wanting to take me down a peg. But as soon as you step foot on the other side, after having tried something new or bold, my experience has been only positive, outrageously positive.
I love it. Outrageously positive.
Outrageously positive. Yes. Yes.
So can you give advice for someone who might be dealing with cancer diagnosis and not sure about, when they look to the future, they don't know what to do next? Do you have any advice for those of us who do feel stuck or not sure if we want to step out on that bridge? What would you say?
Well, my first short piece of advice is just to do it, but that's not terribly satisfying to somebody who's looking over the edge and seeing your toes kind of curling over the edge of that rock, and looking down in the chasm and being afraid of all of it. So better advice would be, what values are you honoring, and what times in your life have you really honored your values? Where have you had that experience of living in your, most outrageous and wonderful and authentic self? What were you doing? What were you thinking about? What perspective or lens were you thinking through? And try that on for size, and say, what would the person who was doing that thing, what would they say to me now about what I should be doing next? What I should be doing in the next 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be what should I be doing next year, or in the next 6 months, even. It can be, what should I do with my day today that will bear fruits and live a little bit closer to that purpose.
Yeah, I love the idea, the next 5 minutes, because our life is made up of the next 5 minutes. Every 5 minutes, we're taking one step towards something. And yes, we look to the 5 year, the 10 year, we look to the long term. How do we make all a big picture come to life? But we make it come to life in the next 5 minutes. And we just keep making that happen over and over until we've lived something out. But we may not know if we have 10 years, but we have 5 minutes. And every 5 minutes that we step forward is closer to that goal. One thing I've been really thinking about lately, and I was talking to my girls about that, is this idea that most beautiful things, most visionary things, whether it's an artist or a playwright or these big concepts, never come to fruition the way the creator wanted them to or expected them to, right? Like I took my girls to the Van Gogh exhibit, and it was like he was seeking after some piece of beauty he had inside of him, but he could never quite get it out right. He painted and painted day and night all the time, but he never was quite satisfied. And it drove him sick and it drove him crazy. And he just kept trying and trying. But even though he didn't accomplish what he was trying to release into the world, what he did release into the world was so beautiful. We've celebrated it and celebrated it and celebrated it, right? And my kids came up with lots of examples around this idea that sometimes the big picture is maybe only for us. Maybe I personally won't change the experience of cancer for every person from here on forward, but that vision is my vision, and I will chase it, and I will change the experience of cancer for one person at a time until I can't do that any longer. And I may never feel like I really got to my goal, but all the people and all the next 5 minutes will add up to change it for a lot of people. And that is, I don't like it when people tell me, well, if you helped one person, that was enough. I'm like, no, I want to change it all. Like, I'm not ready to sit here and like just let this keep going the way it is. But on the other hand, it's true. The next 5 minutes is enough, right? The next person is enough. The next kindness I can show is enough, right? Because it is a seed, and that seed can be multiplied. But sometimes we get hung up on the big picture. How will I ever get to the final result? And that's not the point. The point is, what can you do in the next 5 minutes that will leave a seed, will leave a legacy, and that legacy will multiply, and that multiplication might one day create a result that you've never dreamed of, right? But we have to do the next 5 minutes first.
Yeah, that image of making and of creating and then seeing what happens as a result really resonates with me. I was an artist. I work around artists and creatives all the time. And it's true that often what results from the pen or the brush or from the composer's brain is one thing to the maker, but that has a whole life of its own as an object or as a product, as a creative thing that has fruits for the immediate audience, and often has fruits for some time long after. It has a whole life outside of the maker. And I'm thinking too, as you were talking, that you in particular are somebody who's walking next to me on that bridge. I can't take those steps. I never took those steps by myself. I always carry with me this kind of internal community of people that I think about, that I hold dear, who have inspired me who are living beautiful and audacious lives. And it's in holding people like you that allows me to get to that next step. And you don't always hear that. And it may be that the step happens long after we've spoken or spent time together, but the walking forward is still, I take you with me, and I'm not the only one.
So we've talked a lot about so many beautiful ideas, and you did mention earlier about a gift of cancer and how it's a dark gift, but there is a gift. Can you just sort of wrap up our conversation with what is something you've experienced because of cancer that you value, that's so important to you, but you don't know that you would have ever gotten there if it wasn't for the experience of cancer in your life?
Well, I have to say that my list is long of all of what cancer has given me in terms of gifts. But I'd say one of the biggest that underlies a lot of the others is the idea of really pausing in the present moment and really being mindful and just savor in the goodness of what is around me right now, what is here now, whether it's the sound of children crashing through the house or a plate that I need to pick up off the table that somebody has left behind, but that is still a trace of that person. And all of these kind of little things, I can savor each one of them. I could either do the sigh and the exasperated sigh, or I could really see it as a gift, see each thing as having richness in and of itself. And I think that I know that is what cancer has given me.
I love it. It's beautiful. Well, Krista, thank you so much for sharing your story. You are always a lovely person. And I know that you'll encourage many, many listeners with your life and your perspective, even while living with metastatic disease. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lauren.
I was going to, anyway, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to do the closing, and I close the screen. Podcast, there we go. So, closing. If this conversation has been meaningful to you, please check out the other episodes of our podcast or dig a little deeper by checking out our resources available. You can find more information at adventuretherapyfoundation.org.
I love it. I love it.